Hello, my name is Dante Renee, and welcome to the 10 Room Bizarro YouTube page, where I talk about films that I believe need to be talked about more. Like tonight's film, 1975's Laura's Toys by Mr. Joe Sarno. Now, this DVD is put out by Retro Seduction Cinema, and this is a double feature with Abigail Leslie is back in town. But we're just looking at Laura's Toys from 1975 today, and written and directed by Joe Sarno. This is a film starring Rebecca Brooke, Eric Edwards, and Kathja Graff. Some very interesting things here in this film, especially when you watch just the interview with Joe Sarno and his wife Peggy Sarno concerning the actors in the film, the actresses in the film, and their relationships with one another, and their connections, and what Joe Sarno looked for in his actors, which I believe sets him apart from other directors, especially in the sexploitation erotic genre. So let's get into Laura's Toys 1975. This is essentially a film, it says here on the back, on a Swedish island off the mainland, because you know Joe Sarno was living and working a lot in Sweden, and we have a married couple, and the husband is an archaeologist, and he has a student type assistant who's also a woman who's working with him and staying in their house on this island. And he is working with his assistant, and his wife is kind of spending the day just relaxing. And what envelops here is a bit of a complex relationship triangle, sexual triangle here. But there is also more, where the wife's sexual history and relationships also comes into play within this triangle and the effects thereof. This is 1975's Laura's Toys. So let's get into it. First and foremost, I got to look at the music for this film. The music for Laura's Toys is very recognizable. If I hear it again, I'll completely know it's from Laura's Toys. It's acoustic guitar based, has a nice jazz core to the acoustic guitar. Sounds real sunny, sounds real islandy. Not in a Caribbean sense, but being off the coast of Sweden. I mean, it definitely sounds like you're on the coast. You're near a body of water. There's a boat nearby. Breezy and relaxed, yet with an air of mystery and seduction. There's also some female voice in the score that has a little bit of that erotic kind of jazzy scat vibe in a way, which you would hear in a Jess Franco film a lot. Bruno Nicolai scores. And so the music is very much so a part of this film, and it's throughout the film a good deal. Now, when there isn't music, the sound design is filled with moans and orgasms and intense sexual pleasure and obsession and connection. When we look at the style and the cinematography and the locations, I mean, this is really looks like an island. I mean, there are no sets here. There's a home in the middle of amidst trees and wooded areas. Beautiful body of water with a beach. Very personal. Reminds me of kind of your own private island. No one else around. To get to the town, you need to take a small boat to get there, so you have some distance there. And there's the element of Sarno's filming of faces. I think I gleaned from the interview with Joe Sarno and his wife Peggy Sarno, who worked behind the scenes in his films and was a great support to him, that there was actually some real sex in this film. But unbeknownst to us, we would not necessarily know that, because Sarno wanted to focus on the faces. He wanted to focus on the orgasms. And I've seen a group of Sarno films so far, and this one in particular definitely is an orgasm film. It is a film that focuses, I would say I've never seen orgasms quite like this cinematically. And if some of this sex is real, that just makes it that much more interesting. And if any of it is not real, the acting is tremendous. Joe Sarno is known to want his actors to completely let loose into the roles. And you can see that in this film, but he focuses on the faces and the intensity of the faces. There's beautiful environments and backdrops. Um, and he also has something I wanted to mention with Sarno's films that I've been seeing, and it's in this film as well. He has very interesting editing procedures where the edits are very they operate in their own time scheme. They're very abrupt. They're very he likes to show things happening simultaneously in multiple locations, and the way that he'll do that is by cutting seemingly abruptly and going back and forth to the two locations, not using fades. You know, a lot of, especially modern directors today, they want to use fades. They want to use, you know, fades to black or just have some very, very easy on the brain, easy on the eye transitions. And see, we're looking at a form of cinema here from 1975 from Lars Toys and a lot of the films that I review on this YouTube page that don't want your brain and the mainstream normal culture for things to be easy and comfortable. Because there's not a necessity to. And Joe Sarno's editing techniques are quite interesting and jarring, especially to mainstream viewers and to what we are accustomed to cinematically. Now, the acting in this movie is unbelievable. Okay, when people think of sexploitation films and erotic films and adult films, you know, they're a lot of the general consensus is that they're not, you know, it's not in line with good acting. Well, this movie will completely erase those lies that you have in your head because the actors are just they're fantastic. And if there's not good acting in Lars Toys, Lars Toys won't be sold. The story won't be sold. It just won't be sold. And it is just so intense. Something that I was thinking about while I was watching the movie is the level of intensity of not just the sex, but what surrounds the sex. It's people's faces, not just when they're having sex, but the non-verbal communication around the sex. The glances, the eyes, the silence in allowing the character to think, to look. And I saw that a lot in Vampire Ecstasy also, which is I've reviewed on this YouTube page. But I see it here, where it's this really introspection of the characters and us as the viewer interpreting what those characters are saying when they're not speaking verbally. And it is quite powerful and intense and can only be done by good actors. You know, his films are, this film is very erotic, very sexual, really, there's a power in the sexuality and in the eroticism of Lars Toys. If you see the trailer anywhere online, you'll see it in the trailer. But there's also a power and an intensity in the complex relational drama of this film. The pain, the confusion, the freedom, the adventure, the questions, the uncertainty, the evaluation and introspection of one's life. There's some quite interesting themes running through this film, right when you think that, you know, typically films that deal with a level of freedom and love, from swinging to whatever, will typically have, you know, exposed the faults of that and things. Joe Sarno's films are not that easy to just write it off. You might expose faults, but you're also going to expose benefits or beauty thereof. Laura's Toys, you'll be surprised at how drawn in you are by very, very subtle things. Um, there are some very interesting themes in here as well concerning youth and adulthood, and maybe a bit of humor at the end of this film as well. We have some Swedish actresses in here that their dialogue's a little bit harder to hear, but Joe Sarno definitely did that. He did English language films, and he would have Swedish actors and actresses speak English, and so there wasn't dubbing. You know, it was very, very interesting. Gives an interesting vibe to it. Lars Toys um, is very simple in its locations, where we have a small home in off the island, and then we have a kind of a small apartment in the town. And we have some staples from Joe Sarno in here. You know, we have full nudity from the women, and implied very intense sex, implied oral, implied, you know, missionary and all different sexual positions and orgies. But then there's a couple scenes and near the end of the film where things start to get a little bit more explicit in just a tiny, tiny bit of way. But you can see in one scene that possibly a guy's tongue is actually down there. And then when you find out that there was actually some real sex going on, you can realize some of that. Joe Sarno has some things with you know, phallic dildos again in this film, like a sausage, vibrators. You hear the roar of the vibrator. That is something I've been seeing in a lot of Sarno films. He likes to utilize that. And very kind of operating in another spatial zone, lesbian orgy sequences. And also lesbianism being a sense of escape and freedom and vacation in this particular film, and relaxation for women. Lesbianism being a way for women to cover wounds left by parents, family, marriage, society. And that is evident in Laura's Toys as well, with a very interesting kind of side story involving the wife's friendships and sexual past. Very interesting themes of archaeology, especially when you find out that one of the actresses was actually an archaeologist. But archaeology and connected to the archaeology of sex as well, and of love and relationships. This is 1975's Laura's Toys by Mr. Joe Sarno. Thank you so much for watching the 10 Room Bizarro YouTube page, where I talk about films that I believe need to be talked about more, like 1975's Laura's Toys. I sincerely hope that those double doors behind me do not open while I'm sitting here. Good night.